Hello, beautiful people of the internet. Welcome to another episode of the Flatback 3. I am your host, Toby Wellington, joined by Mr. Alistair Blackwell and Mr. George Turner for another episode on the MCU and its ongoing, slow, painful death. Gents, before we talk about the slow, painful death of the MCU, how are we doing?
All good here, thank you, mate. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very tired. Obviously, I was in Scotland last week, hence no group episode. But back to business, back to work this week. So it's been a very busy week. What about you, Alistair? How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Yeah.
Oh, he sounds enthusiastic. I love it.
Ready?
We're talking about the death of arguably the greatest movie franchise since Disney killed Star Wars. So let's talk about Disney killing the MCU. But first and foremost, the reason that we are talking about this today is because despite me and Alistair coming on and absolutely rinsing Ant-Man 3, George, you sent us a voice note the other week. Do you want to tell the viewers and the listeners what you said about Ant-Man 3?
Yeah, it's probably going to be my last appearance on the pod with all the hate I'll get after this. But yeah, it appears that I'm in the small minority that
Tiny minority.
Yeah, I really like this film. And there are some strengths of the film that I would like to point out, which I thought the creators of this film captured really well. And first of all, and remember before we did the preview, I mentioned about I was really looking forward to seeing what the quantum realm would look like. And for me, I thought they captured that really well. Like, it was so strange. It was so weird. Like, all the different characters, you had that massive, like, almost like Ditto creature, Ditto from Pokemon. And almost like, you had like, that was the one that you could like shoot holes in it. And yeah, he was really funny. And I remember like when they all go to that bar in the quantum realm, it made me think it almost had like a Star Wars sort of feel to it. And I really didn't hate that. I thought it was really cool. So that side of things, I really liked. I thought the film overall, I know we talked about it again in the preview, was that we were worried the fact that it had Paul Rudd in it, was it going to be too funny for the seriousness of this type of film? And for me, I felt they caught the balance. They got the balance bang on, and it was really good. Unlike Thor: Love and Thunder, where it was just too silly and too just unnecessarily over the top, I thought Paul Rudd, he did an extremely good job in the film. So that was really good. And lastly, I will comment quickly to say, I thought Jonathan Majors did really well as well. Although he didn't have a lot to do, and his ending to the film is questionable, I will say that. I thought his portrayal of the character was really, really good. His physicality was very good. And coming from an acting background, his portrayal and like the idea, you sort of looked at him, and even though he didn't move very quickly, he just gave this demeanor that he's not someone to be messed with. And I thought, oh yeah, he's a really bad, powerful guy. So those are the three things I took away from that film. And I thought, yeah, really like it.
Okay, so you can't say you enjoyed a film because it had three good things in it, first and foremost.
I just did. Like, I mean, I'm sure we're going to get on to like the crux of phase 5 and stuff. But for me, I do want to say this. I feel like going from phase 4, going into phase 5, my expectation of Marvel movies has gone down. So I'm not going into a Marvel movie thinking I'm ready to get my socks blown off. Because, for example, when I watched Avengers Infinity War, I was literally on the edge of my seat for like 2.5 hours. And I think throughout phase 4, I was thinking I was going to get that same experience, but I didn't. So I just kind of went into this film thinking I was watching like any other film I've been watching recently, like Creed, Cabins in the Wood. And I'm thinking, well, I just enjoyed it. I just thought it was a good film.
So that brings us to the point of this podcast. We are not going to review Ant-Man and the Wasp again as a whole. We will talk about the points that you've brought up, and then we'll talk about Marvel as a whole. first and foremost, that is indicative of what is wrong with Marvel at the moment. There is no anticipation for the quality of their films. You go into it expecting it to be fucking subpar, and that's the problem. They've set such a precedent over a whole phase of a few years in phase 4 that all their films are going to be pretty sub-average at best, that now you go into a movie like, if this is better than crap, I'll be impressed. And I think that Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is actually terrible. I really do. I mean, like, the CGI, the green screen stuff, and the like sort of outfits for the characters in the quantum realm, I'll give you that. It looks like a fucking good film. Like, it looks great. Like, you know, the people that are like, oh, it's all just a green screen. Yeah, like, you can't create the quantum realm practically, can you? So let's be fair. I disagree with everything else. Although, actually, I will say, I think Jonathan Majors is the best part of the film. I think we said that at the time, Alistair, that Jonathan Majors' performance, can't really fault it. He tries to give off a demeanor of someone who is sinister and someone that you wouldn't mess with, but then they make him look a complete arsehole in the fight scenes because he forgets that he's got his best weapons. You know, like we said, he's sort of eviscerating people. And then as soon as Ant-Man, Cassie, and the Wasp turn up, he decides that he's just going to punch and kick them. Like, and this is the problem with, it's the same with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. You can't show them to have these devastating spells or powers, and then when there's a fist fight, just take them away. It doesn't work like that. You can't just all of a sudden not have the same power. So Jonathan Majors does the best with what he can. I think the biggest problem that I have with your watching of it, George, and I think this is the main thing that I can't understand how you got through this film, is the comedy. I thought the comedy was horrendous in this. Not as bad as Thor: Love and Thunder. Thor: Love and Thunder for me is the second worst Marvel film of all time. This is probably third or fourth though. Like, there were some funny bits. Like, I really enjoy the one bit where the guy, you know, like the pink alien thing, the Ditto thing you said, and he goes, "How many holes do you have?" And then the other guy goes, "7." And then Ant-Man goes, "Yeah, that's right." Like, that was the only point I was like, huh. And that's all it got from me, was a huh. Other than that, they're like trying to force comedy in where it isn't needed again. And the biggest like comedy forcing aspect of it that was just a complete joke in itself was what they did to MODOK. Like, he's horrendous in the movie, and then his arc from start to end of that movie, like, what should I be? Just don't be a dick. Oh, amazing. Then he like has that death scene where he literally just saves the multiverse, and they all stand over him like almost like he's dead. Like, I really dislike this movie, and it's mainly because I'm coming from it. Maybe I'm coming from it with too high expectations, but at the end of the day, Marvel have set their own stall. They've set their own expectations, and when you have something like Endgame, and then Kevin Feige comes out, the guy who runs Marvel, and says before this film, this is the most important film since Endgame, you anticipate it being treated like that, not like it's just not a grand film. And that's what this was supposed to be. It was supposed to be, right, phase 4 was a mistake, this is kickstarting phase 5 in it that makes me excited for the rest of phase 5. I really wanted to, before I hand over to Alistair, I really wanted to say, I heard this comment the other day in another podcast I was listening to, and I've said it in the past as well. If you look at, and I will show you in a second, the rest of phase 5. So here is the rest of the phase 5 slate. You've got Guardians, Echo, Loki season 2, The Marvels, Blade, Ironheart, Agatha, Coven of Chaos, Daredevil Born Again, Captain America, and Thunderbolt. You'd think that was a joke, that's a whole Marvel phase, because Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is not really taking place in the MCU timeline anymore, in a way that it is the end of the Guardians story. That is what it is functioning to be. So it's not going to involve anything that's going to be too tightly drawn to the rest of the MCU. Then I cannot find a single human on Earth who cares about the Marvels. That's not a thing that anyone cares about. Blade has been pushed back, so one project that might have been interesting has now been delayed. Like Echo and Ironheart have been pushed to next year, but again, no one really cares about those series. There's a reason they've been pushed back rather than brought out at the right time. Agatha Harkness is about a side character. Daredevil Born Again is going to be Disney-fied because we saw what they did to him in She-Hulk, so he's probably going to be a like way softer version than what he should be. And what is also terrible news is that John Bernthal has agreed to come back as the Punisher in a Disney series, so that's going to be great. And then Captain America New World Order is Falcon with a shield. He doesn't have any powers, so I still don't understand what they're going to do with him. And the Thunderbolts, I'll give them credit. The Thunderbolts might be interesting, but again, I don't understand what they're going to do with tying that into this big multiversal saga. And that is where Marvel is killing itself, is that they made the mistake after doing the Infinity Saga of going straight for the Marvel multiversal saga. I was talking about this with Philippa the other day, and Alistair, I am going to throw to you, I promise, in just a second. But I want to throw this point out first for you to sort of discuss and think about, with George, you coming on to this as well, is that Marvel would have been in a much better place if they had gone from Thanos to looking at Earth specifically. You still could have had Guardians out in space doing their thing, same as the should have looked at the implications of the blip and all these different people coming back from non-existence for 5 years, people that had risen to power in the meantime. And you could have had, instead of making him look a complete twat in the Hawkeye, you could have had Kingpin, Mayor, and Runner of New York. And you could have had the next Avengers movie, could have been the new Captain America, Sam Wilson, Ant-Man, because Ant-Man against Kingpin makes more sense than Ant-Man against Kang. You could have had Captain America, Ant-Man, Spider-Man is a classic Kingpin rival anyway. Hawkeye, Kate Bishop, Yelena Maximoff. There's your Avengers. Like She-Hulk even fits into that. So the next phase or two could have been resetting Earth as a base for the Avengers while slowly introducing new characters to then go multiversal saga because of what is simultaneously happening in Loki.
I think you're kind of right, to be fair. And actually, like, when, I like that idea where maybe the next few phases, they should have maybe honed in a bit more on what they're doing, making it a bit more personal to Earth again, and focusing, like you said, on an earthly villain, like a Kingpin or something, where it does exactly that. It introduces or it brings in a bit more purpose to all of those earthly superheroes, where they have a bit more of a purpose in this kind of in this MCU. And then later down the line, is it, to be honest, the timeline in terms of our timeline, like for Avengers, doesn't have to have changed much. Like what they're bringing the Avengers ones out in 2026, is it, or 7?
6 or 7, yeah.
I think it's 26 from what I remember, but it might be 7. So that's still 3 years away. And so you could do loads in that time, and you could have made some like Earth Avengers thing. And then in the meantime, like you said, this thing is building up with Kang, where it introduces it. And
do you know what's crazy?
Yeah.
What's crazy is if you look at the Infinity Saga, that's what they fucking did. Is that they had the Guardians of the Galaxy, Captain Marvel, etc., all happening on the side, and then on Earth they had all of these heroes that were having their own stories developed, and they were crossing over every so often. Like in Ant-Man 1, when he comes across the Avengers base and the Falcon, which is like, oh shit, this is actually happening in the same universe. Whereas now it's like She-Hulk's over there, Moon Knight's over there, Daredevil's shown up here. Spider-Man, for some reason, despite being based in New York, hasn't shown up during anything. Ms. Marvel, who everyone's forgotten about, like likes the Avengers, but you never see anything happening with it. Like,
do you reckon
Sorry,
do you reckon that is what they kind of tried to do? Or
I was just thinking
maybe that's something they're maybe still intending to do over the next few years with these films, where straight away I just think about the idea of, like, when you play a game like a superhero game, and you have those introductions on the streets, or those meetings on the streets between two characters like a Spider-Man and fucking whoever, and how you see like normally like Batman, Catwoman, stuff like that, and those sorts of things on the streets, like that could be happening between characters in other films and stuff, or series, or whatever they, and maybe that was something they were looking to try and do a bit more, but it doesn't seem, at the moment.
They've shot themselves in the foot so badly that they can't do that now, because no one has responded well to any of these characters or any of these new stories. That's why they're having to delay and fast track other certain projects. Like Echo and Ironheart have been delayed because no one fucking wants to see it. People want to see, you've got a Secret Invasion coming out this year. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Like, the Skrulls are on Earth. They're like they've been established as something that is on Earth right now, as a race of creatures that can literally transform into anyone. And I was telling Philippa the other day about Secret Invasion in the comics, how the Skrulls literally turn into superheroes. They turn into versions of superheroes, and then the other Avengers can't tell which one is which, and it causes a real dynamic shift in the way that those characters interact with each other, and then how the world responds to the Avengers. And that could have been your next villain based on Earth. It could have been an alien race based on Earth. They have, honest to God, they've taken a shotgun and pointed it at their own foot rather than shooting themselves in the foot with a pistol. They've taken their foot clean off, because they've just made an absolute mess of what they've tried to do. And what you can't do now is you can't backtrack it. You can't go, right, ignore She-Hulk, that never happened, ignore Moon Knight, that never happened, because there's always going to be a small percentage of people that are like, well, I liked She-Hulk, like that must be about in the tens that enjoyed She-Hulk, but where is She-Hulk? You can't just have that person not ever turn up again. Like Moon Knight, they didn't even know what they were going to do with Moon Knight until this year. And that came out, what, a year and a half ago now?
Yeah.
And that, again, we talk about Kingpin being a villain, potentially, or you could have had Kingpin and the Punisher working together or something like that. That gives you the opportunity to introduce Daredevil and Moon Knight, and even Ironheart could have been more easily introduced, because Wakanda Forever was a terrible way to introduce that character, because you make her Iron Man in one movie. She doesn't have to go through any trials and tribulations. She doesn't have to go through any effort to become the character that she is within one movie. Whereas you look at Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, he had to literally have his heart kept together by a magnet, that he then created a suit that was big, clunky piece of shit that he walked out of a cave in just to survive. And then over all the different movies, he developed to a point of having nanotech from where he was at the start. Whereas now you've got a character who's like, I'm, of course, a teenage female genius. I'll just build an Iron Man suit in 20 minutes.
It's literally I was going to say, I remember on a Big Bang Theory, there was a joke where it's like, it's just, Howard gets told it's simple, just do this thing and you can do it. And he's like, well, you can't do that. It's like saying, here's a plane, get in it and just fly it. And that's how you do it. And it's just it's never that simple. And I think actually with Ironheart, change the dynamics of what a character does in a film. She could have been in Wakanda Forever. Have her as the character she was gonna be Ironheart, and then have her maybe a not quite the best example, but maybe have her try on a suit, fuck up, and not quite make it, and it's look, you're gonna have to sit this one out. You're just not good enough at the moment. And then later on in another film, she then comes back and she's been working her way up, and that's how you can do it. Instead of just allowing a character to every time it's in a film, finds a power, finds out their powers, whether it's through bionically or genetically or whatever, and then by the end of the film, they've fucking mastered it.
Hey, you're forgetting one thing with that character, the same as a number of different characters, and that is that they are women. And I'm not being sexist. It's not a misogynistic point of view. It's fact that female characters in the MCU over the last two phases have been introduced and become amazing at what they are doing without having to try.
Compared to Hulk, who had to really control his issues with being the Hulk and being Bruce Banner and this and that and Iron Man and you know how many others we can flipping count and say,
Thor,
and Ant-Man and Thingy, his daughter, who all of a
mate,
sudden,
yeah,
all of a
Fury.
that's that's
Yeah.
what I was going to say. Like I said about George, I said to Alistair in our Ant-Man review, I don't know if you've watched it, but like Cassie Masters being in an Ant-Man suit within less than the whole film. Whereas you remember in Ant-Man 1, Scott literally had to train for weeks
Right.
to use the suit and to use the ant headphone thingy. Shuri, you saw in Black Panther had been training for years and years. Shuri puts on a suit, eats the purple herb, can kill multiple Atlanteans or whatever they were, without even trying. And it's just really, and that again, like you said, Alistair, that's the problem. There's no arc for these characters. It's like, I have a superpower, okay, I can do it.
Yeah.
Like you even see it in the Spider-Man movies, like the most recent one, No Way Home. He's still making mistakes. Like that's like Peter Parker is a teenage boy. He's still making mistakes. Aunt May gets killed. He puts everyone at risk by fucking up the spell with Doctor Strange, and that's part of the love that everyone has for that character, is because you can see the trial and tribulation they're having to go through. But also, just to go back to our other point really quickly, because I had a thought whilst you were talking, Alistair, because you were talking about like what was it you were talking about? You mentioned something that you said about Kingpin, and it brought to a thought to me, was that you know, like we're talking about having like a street level or an earth-based villain for a long period of time, and it doesn't have to be like a huge villain. It could have been someone like Kingpin with loads of goons and loads of cronies that the Avengers had to work through. But imagine, instead of just going, right, here's all these different super beings that are all inexplicably in a very small area but never cross over, you could have instead had, right, Sam Wilson's now Captain America, you got Ant-Man, you got Spider-Man, you got Doctor Strange, and then you could introduce maybe 3 or 4. And instead of them all just going, I'm amazing at this and I can fight villains, you have like Sam Wilson, Scott Lang, and Spider-Man working sort of together as like a disbanded Avengers almost, and coming together every so often to be like, oh man, we are like we can't deal with the amount of stuff that's going on. We really need to like think of a new way to deal with things. And then they could introduce a way of like, oh, you know, we came across, you know, like how Iron Man in Civil War is like, oh, the YouTube videos of the Spider Kid, let's hunt down him and find him and recruit him. Like they could do that, and they could be like, oh, I've heard of this guy who's running around in a white cape chasing werewolves, and they find Moon Knight and they recruit Moon Knight to the Street Avengers essentially. But instead of that, you just have She-Hulk's here, and oh, Shang-Chi's now got magic rings that can make him kill a massive dragon. I like Shang-Chi, obviously. I like completely, but again, you look at a character like Shang-Chi against Kingpin, makes sense. Like, because you can just have him go through waves of enemies whilst he's being attacked by waves of enemies. Other people can be trying to beat up Kingpin. Like, it all comes down to something that Alistair pointed out. I think it was Alistair, it might have been George, pointed out months ago on a podcast. Can you imagine Daredevil running at Kang?
Yeah, exactly.
Although after Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, yes, because Kang is shit in a fist fight, it turns out. But yeah, George, what do you think? Me and Alistair have basically been talking at each other for about 5 minutes.
No, I've just been listening away. It's interesting. I never thought about that, having Kingpin as like a next. It does make sense to have the next sort of phase of Marvel, not dumbing it down, but almost like having a more Earth-based level threat.
Bringing it back down to Earth, ironically, is the best phrase for it.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. Also, you said about Marvel shooting themselves in the foot. Like, I can imagine the budgets, like creating all the CGI for these different universes. Must be battling against themselves all the time.
Right? That is a beautiful transition into something I want to show you that Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, not only is it a personal perspective or like an audience feedback thing that it's a bad film and that Marvel is dying. Here are the statistics of how bad Marvel has got. Okay, so Ant-Man 2015. I'm just going to move some stuff around on my screen. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so Ant-Man 2015 made $518 million total, okay, domestic and internationally. Ant-Man and the Wasp made $623 million. That one, I will say, slight cheat because it was between Infinity War and Endgame. But here's the kicker. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, most important film since Endgame, to kick off Phase 5 so far, less than 450 million. And that is not going to grow by much over the next few weeks, because you bear in mind that it's already been in the cinemas for about 3 weeks at this point. So it's not going to gain much more money. So it's, in theory, likely to make less than the original Ant-Man movie. And it's got this Ant-Man movie, sorry to keep bouncing between screens, I think had $150 million budget as its ceiling. This had a $230 million budget.
Yeah.
So then they're making less money now than they ever have done. It is literally a certified flop. And if you look at like the reports from, I think this is comicbooks.com, Marvel had a Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania had a 69.7% second week drop. So it's the biggest drop from week 1 to week 2 in viewership of all time in Marvel. So Marvel is not just from a personal perspective and an audience perspective, it's not dying just that way. It's statistically dying.
It's worrying, isn't it? That's probably why Kevin Feige's come out and reportedly said he's postponing a lot of TV series and films, and I think they're thinking very carefully what they're going to do next.
Yeah, I think
sorry, go on.
Going back to the Quantumania, like I think if you were going back straight to this, when we were speaking about it at the start, like if you were going to that, we kind of spoke about this the other day, if you're going into that like as a solo movie and just as it is, you could probably get away with looking at it and thinking, like, with no real understanding of who Kang is and what's going on, you could probably look at it as a solo movie and go, it's not a bad film in terms of, obviously the CGI is really good. The plot, if you take away your understanding of everything else that's going on, the layers beforehand and what you're expecting after, you'd probably say it's an all right, like an okay film. But when you're obviously a bit more invested in the whole MCU, that's when you start getting the the faults in it, and a lot of faults, really.
And that is where Marvel has shot themselves in the foot the most. Because they're like, right, you have to care about everything, you have to watch all the series, you have to have watched all the previous phases, and then you bring out a film that, on its own, you'd watch it and go, that's not bad. But you have to have cared about everything that comes before it to know what is going on.
I saw something on Instagram which I thought was quite funny, which summed it up a little bit as well. It was like an explain a plot badly thing, and it was for Ant-Man, it was a privileged white family confronts and harasses a successful black man in his own home. I was like, yeah, it's pretty much like it kind of sums it up in a funny way, but
like the MCU as a whole is dead and dying. Like, I personally think it's never going to get back to what it was. Like, if they manage to pull it back round to the cultural phenomenon that it was, I'll be gobsmacked. Like, I'll genuinely be gobsmacked. I'll do a podcast in the nude. Like, I honestly can never see Marvel getting back to what it was, because they captured the imaginations of everyone with Infinity War and Endgame. And we're not, we never made a movie. We're not experts, but from a fan's perspective, they should have gone away for 2 or 3 years, not brought anything out, and then come back with the sort of street level stuff rather than trying to continue to escalate. Because if you go from Thanos to Kang, next has to be something bigger again, which in fairness, they've still got Galactus. But then after Galactus, what do you do? And this is something where Kevin Feige and Disney will want Marvel to go on for years and years and years. This isn't something they're going to give up easily. There's a reason that they're delaying stuff, and there's a reason that people aren't going to watch Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. There's a reason that people aren't watching all the TV series. And do you want me to tell you what the secret is as to why no one's watching it? Because no one fucking cares. No one cares. You've got no reason to care about, like, even characters I liked from the latest stuff. Like, no one cares about Moon Knight. No one cares about Loki anymore. No one cares about She-Hulk or Ms. Marvel, because you've got no reason to care, especially when it's.
But I guarantee you care a bit more about Spider-Man,
because he's a legacy character that's been in it for a long time.
But like you said also earlier, also it's like there's a massive arc in the whole series to his story. So you're invested in both his development as a superhero and as a person, you know, growing up, as a kid growing up, and you can relate to him a bit more. Like, you know, with those things, it adds, you know, purpose to why you want to watch the films. If you've got, like you said, like, you know, we've already said, like, yeah, people like Shuri or this other Cassian that who, you know, have freaking pretty much just come to a film and, like, you know, gone from no superhero to a superhero at the end, from start to end of the film. It's like, oh, okay, right, well,
great
superhero. All right,
do
cool.
you know what's a great comparison on that point out is that you take two characters that they introduced in phase 4, rather than looking at, do you know what, like, you've made a great point, but instead of like taking a legacy character, let's take a character they introduced in phase 4. You've got Moon Knight and you've got Shuri. There's two characters I've plucked out of thin air, right? Shuri, like you said, Shuri's a good example because you just mentioned it. Takes a herb, which does give you powers, but immediately is really good at martial arts, really good at fighting hand to hand, really good at working like out the kinks of the suit and stuff like that, and is able to take down Namor, who is like a 100,000-year-old warrior made out, like, who's got weapons made out of adamantium. Moon Knight has been operating as Moon Knight for a number of years very successfully, but as soon as I cannot, like, for the life of me cannot remember, and this is the other problem, I cannot for the life of me remember what happens in that show, but you know when the Stephen Graham, the guy who is like the nerdy scared one, as soon as he gets control of the suit, he can do fuck all with it. And like that is still the case until the last episode. If you remember when he first gets it, he fights the invisible jackal, gets his ass handed to him and has to give the suit back over. And then when he takes over the suit during the fight with the guys who were on the horses, he gets like 15 spears put through him and he's like, okay, take the body back, take the body back. And he learns how to control the power as the series progresses. And he, you know, in that final fight scene against Arthur Harrow, he ends up actually being able to work with Mark Spector to beat him in a hand-to-hand combat fight. So he actually develops that understanding of his power through a series of events. Whereas in certain things, in movies and shows, like She-Hulk's a better example because that happens over a series. She-Hulk becomes She-Hulk and tells Hulk that she's better than him, and in one episode they're like, she can do everything Hulk can do plus a bit more, and you're like, great, okay, that's great. So there's no issues, no difficulty. Okay.
Thank you for ruining my perception of Hulk for the last 10 years.
And that's, I'm sorry that they are, God, it's going to sound sexist and misogynistic, but God forbid a woman, a female character, whatever, has any ounce of difficulty in their storyline. Can you think of a female character that's had to go through something in phase 4? Because even if you take someone like Wanda, who had to go through the emotional torment that she went through, she took a whole town hostage and then was allowed to walk away. And then in the next phase, the next thing she turned up in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, he was like, hey, you made everything right at Westview. Sorry, what? She kidnapped hundreds of people and she just walked away. She didn't even say sorry. She just walked away. You made everything right. So if I kidnap someone and then just let them go, I won't get in trouble. Good to know. That's good to know. I didn't realise the world worked that way.
I know. I just don't think
they're not telling good stories. That's the problem. That is
Yeah.
the be all and end all. Is if they told a good story, and I know you didn't enjoy it as much, George, but Spider-Man No Way Home. If they tell a good story, people go and watch it. I'm going to really quickly, George, whilst you were going to speak then, I'm going to have a look at the numbers Spider-Man No Way Home did.
I was just going to say that one of the things I was thinking about, like, did they think this properly before launching Phase 4? Like, did all the directors, did everyone? It just feels like they've just hired in separate directors, like, and there's no cohesive, like, forward planning, forward thinking. It's not like they sat around a table before Phase 4 kicked off and be like, right, this is how our story is going to intertwine. It's just, nothing connects. I think that's the
scattergun.
Yeah,
scattergun approach, and they've sort of admitted to that as well. In the oh wow, they've admitted that in the that Phase 4 was a mistake. Basically, Kevin Feige came out and said that. Essentially, he said that we tried to do too much in Phase 4. Too much happened at once. That's why they're now having to scale back. Scale back how much they're planning to do in Phase 5 and 6. That's why they're delaying and cancelling projects. Here's actually, let me grab something else a minute. Fill the airtime. Fill the airtime.
So one thing I spoke to you guys about was that I watched Avengers Endgame recently, and I said to you both that I feel like they could have ended the whole MCU just at the end of that film.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
It let that final scene where they're all looking at Robert Downey when they're at Iron Man's funeral. It just left so much for the imagination, like how I feel like they had really good endings for all the characters that were there, and like even though they have done most of those things that we were thinking about, it just hasn't paid off. And I just think they could have left it for so much longer, and just
But they also didn't. Like, they could have left it. They decided not to. So what they should have done is pay off the endings for those characters, rather than just introducing loads of new characters, and then for some of the characters that have interacted with them, basically show them as completely crap. So like you talked about Hulk gets completely emasculated and like faulted through the whole of his appearance in She-Hulk. Hawkeye gets his ass handed to him a couple of times in his series, though does eventually show to be a good character still. But I'm trying to even think, like, Spider-Man has been shown to be that's the best thing about Tom Holland's Spider-Man, is that he has been shown to be exactly what Spider-Man is. He is a kid who is going through the hell of trying to have two different lives at the same time. Doctor Strange and Thor, they've completely ruined. They've made them bumbling idiots, despite being Doctor Strange. Literally in Endgame, he is said to be the best of us. So he's gone from being the best of us to being a complete tit. And then Thor, who's spent 3 movies, Infinity War and Endgame, finding himself, then spends Thor Love and Thunder, a bumbling idiot who doesn't know what to do with himself. They completely ruined all the legacy characters they had, except for Spider-Man. And can I tell you why they didn't ruin Spider-Man? Because Sony were involved. Sony won't let them ruin Spider-Man because he's their character. They don't own him. It terrifies me that they own the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, which, by the way, if they keep going the way they're going, we're never going to see.
That's true.
They're going to have to introduce them at some point soon, because you can't have the multiversal war without the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, surely. But at the same time, I don't want them to turn up, because all 4 of the Fantastic Four will be female, and then all of the different X-Men will be now called the X-People. It's going to be ridiculous, and everyone will have mastered their powers within 10 minutes of being on the screen. It'll be completely ridiculous. And also, let's just show, again, statistically, how Marvel is slowly killing itself, because, they're slowly killing themselves because they're not writing good stories. So this is the current number for Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, as I brought up just a moment ago. 449 million currently. I'd be surprised if it made 500 million at box office. Spider-Man No Way Home, less than 2 years ago, 1.9 billion. Hey! Tell a good story, make people want to go. They'll fucking go and watch it.
It's mental.
It's
I didn't think that.
Wow.
Huh?
I didn't think that was going to be that number.
Mate, like, make a good film, people will go and see it. George, here's an example of making a good film and go and see it. George, how many times did you go and see Top Gun Maverick in the cinema?
I saw it twice, yeah.
Saw it twice because it was that fucking good.
Yeah.
I went to see Endgame twice. I went to see Age of Ultron twice. I went to see Infinity War 3 times. I went to see John Wick. Yeah, John Wick, the first one, twice because it was a good film. I went to see Spider-Man No Way Home twice because it was a good film. If you make good films, people will pay to go and watch them. There's a reason that no Marvel movie was up for any Oscars except for Best Costume Design, you fucking idiots. It makes me angry that people are going... I genuinely... This is the worst thing I can say about Marvel at the minute. And you guys will be absolutely gobsmacked to this, I swear on my life. I don't care anymore. Phil said, will we go and see the Marvels when it comes out? I said, maybe 2 or 3 weeks after it comes out, but I'm not going to go and watch it on night of release because I don't care. I don't care about the stories they're telling. They have got me with Guardians of the Galaxy. I'll give them that because I want to see the end of that story. But everything after that, I don't care.
There's something in the back of my head is thinking, after Guardians, I might take a bit of a break from it as well.
They've ruined it for the fan base that has followed it this far because they've tried to do too much too quickly and they've done all of the gender politics stuff. And that is not the biggest thing that bothers me. If they want to have a more female-based cast, then they can do that if they write good stories, but they haven't written good stories to establish those characters as key characters in this universe. That is the problem. Marvel need to get their finger out of their arseholes and write a good story. Create a good character, and the evidence shows people will go and watch it. It's there in the statistics.
I don't know if this is just social media talking, but I heard they're trying to get the Russo brothers back for some films in the future. If that will make any difference.
I haven't seen that, but I wouldn't surprise me because they need someone or something to help them bring it back because it's gone. It's gone. What they had is not there anymore. It's a shame because we all love Marvel's phase 1, 2, and 3, and some aspects of 4 and 5 might be good, but it is not anymore an MCU timeline. We've got very angry. We've debated some wonderful topics. I think that's a good place to end it, don't you?
Aye.
Okay, well, don't forget, thank you very much for watching, but don't forget, subscribe, follow us on Instagram, listen to us on Spotify, watch us on YouTube. Thank you very much for listening, watching, and enjoying, and we will see you soon.